Welcome back to the Right Way Sports Network YouTube channel. I'm your host, Aidan, Maher, and in today's video, we're talking some fantasy football. We're talking a little bit of Allen Robinson, who after years of elite fantasy production, burned a lot of managers last season. You took him in the third, maybe the fourth round of your redraft leagues, and he did nothing. It was double-digit weeks for him were a rarity last season. It was one of the biggest shocks in fantasy football last year, and when discussing a potential bounce back, a lot of people just point to the situation because it absolutely has improved, right? In Chicago last year, it was an awful situation. Now he's taken a complete 180. He's in an LA offense that is absolutely elite, and it's so much better. It is a clear upgrade, and that is absolutely helpful when talking about a bounce back. A good situation can supplement and boost a wide receiver's fantasy production. Absolutely, no doubt about it. But everybody knows the situation is better, and there are still people out there that are skeptical of Allen Robinson heading into next season. And the reason they're skeptical is because, hey, he was really, really bad last year. He did not produce at all for my fantasy teams. And yeah, I get it was a bad situation last season, but he's put up elite numbers before in terrible situations. So why was last year any different? Why should we give him the bad situation pass? That is why a lot of people are skeptical, and that is the focus of today's video. I want to focus more on whether or not we should be, how much we should be concerned about his lack of production last year. Does he deserve a free pass, or is this a legitimate concern and sign of regression for Robinson? That is my target audience today. Because again, nobody's skeptical about the situation, but plenty of people are skeptical about whether or not Robinson has regressed or not, whether he is still an elite wide receiver due to the struggles last season. And I want to start this thing off with Odell Beckham Jr. because at the midway point of last season, he found himself in a very similar situation to where Allen Robinson is at right now. And there are some differences, which I'll touch up on, but OBJ, fresh off an ACL injury, comes back in week 3 for the Browns last season, plays in 6 games, had 1 or 2 weeks of good, solid fantasy production, but gave you more duds than he did, productive weeks, ultimately averaging under 7 points per game in those 6 games for the Browns. He was frustratingly inconsistent, and part of the reason was, look, the Browns were a low passing volume offense. They love to run the ball. Baker Mayfield was bad last season, which certainly led to some disconnect between him and OBJ. OBJ voiced those concerns. And this is a Browns offense that used Brown as kind of like a field stretcher, a guy who was clearing safeties out and creating space over the middle for other receivers, which led to him sacrificing some targets. Yeah, it was overall just not a good situation. OBJ did not want to be there. He obviously gets released, and the Rams pick him up. And even with this huge boost in terms of situation, this is obviously much better in LA, there were still people that were skeptical of Beckham because, look, he didn't produce with the Browns. He had always been inconsistent there. So why should I believe in him now? I wasn't one of those people. I still believed OBJ was, an elite receiver. But I remember specifically sitting on the Game Changer show, and there were people on our panel that were saying, hey, yeah, I'm pretty much out on OBJ. So I did find that interesting. There were a lot of people who shared those same concerns. But when he got to the Rams, again, obviously more passing volume, better quarterback, but you also saw them utilize him much differently than the Browns did, where the Browns use him as a decoy and sacrifice targets. I don't want to say the Rams supplemented him with a ton of targets, but they found really good matchups for him to exploit. They did a really, really good job of setting up OBJ with, squaring him off with lesser cornerbacks, smaller cornerbacks, which he feasted over, all around the field, but specifically in the red zone. We saw in those 7 games, and I took out the 49ers game, by the way, in case you were wondering, because that San Francisco game, it was his first game in LA. He had a 30% snap share. I was like, look, I'm not adding this game to the equation. But other than that, he had 9 red zone targets for 5 touchdowns in those 7 games. Whereas with Cleveland, he had 0 touchdowns on 3 red zone targets. Obviously, LA's getting to the red zone more, but they really utilized him as a focal point of their red zone offense. And I think that's a role Allen Robinson could absolutely step into next season. Now, again, I talked about how there are some differences. And with Allen Robinson, let's just go ahead and highlight his Bears situation real quick because we want to find some of the similarities between Chicago and Cleveland with OBJ and Allen Robinson. Robinson was sitting there last season, obviously, bad quarterback play, low passing volume. This is a team that doesn't run a lot of snaps per minute. And in a ways, Matt Nagy did scheme Allen Robinson out of the offense in plenty of weeks last season. So let's keep that in mind as well. But similar to OBJ, Allen Robinson did not want to be there. He voiced that issue last offseason. When the Bears gave him the franchise tag, he said, no, I don't want this. I'm coming off multiple elite seasons. I'm in my prime. I've played on pretty much my whole career. I played with the Jaguars and the Bears. I've hardly ever been on a playoff team. I want to go out there, get my money. I want to get that long-term deal while I'm coming off those elite seasons. And I preferably would like to go to a contender. And instead, Chicago makes him wait one more year on locking up that elite deal. And they're a bad team. They're a bad football team. And Robinson was not happy. This is a player who's already established himself as an elite receiver. He's already made money before. He wants to go lock up the long-term deal, play for a good team. And I don't use this card too often. Actually, I do rarely. But because of all those factors, I do believe Allen Robinson maybe took his foot off the gas a little bit last season. I really do, for all the factors that I just mentioned. And again, I don't say that very often, but it is very, very rare for a guy who has had established elite production for years upon years upon years throughout his entire NFL career to then in his year 28, his age 28 season, to just fall off a cliff like that. And I get it was a bad situation, but like some of these other people have mentioned, no one in specific, but he's performed in bad situations before. So that's the thing with Allen Robinson. And this is part of the reason why I do believe in LA where, okay, not quite the contract maybe he hoped for an offseason ago, but he did get paid. He's on a contender. This is a new situation. This is somewhere he really wants to be. I think you're going to see a remotivated, a reamped Allen Robinson, obviously in a much better situation. And it's going to lead to a lot more success. But people saw those, again, I just detailed it a couple minutes ago, a hair under 12 points per game from OBJ. And people are going to sit there and say, that's great, but that ain't elite. Well, luckily with Allen Robinson, the outlook is even better. His last 1,000-yard season came in 2020. This time a year ago, we considered Allen Robinson one of the best receivers in football. Odell Beckham's last 1,000-yard season was in 2019, so it was a bit longer ago. Their last major injury, Beckham's came in 2020. He missed the second half of the 2020 season. Last year, he was fresh off an ACL tear. Whereas with Allen Robinson, it's been years since he suffered a major injury. 2017 to be exact. And I think the contracts are one of the most telling things here. Because Beckham signed with the Rams mid-season on a one-year, $1.25 million deal. It was intended to be the wide receiver 3 behind Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods at the time. This was, again, mid-season. No other receivers are on the market. The Rams are a contending team. They're probably sitting there and saying, hey, look, this is a low-risk, high-reward opportunity for us. Let's just go after it. Not the case with Allen Robinson, though. Because here you have a whole free agency pool to choose from. You could re-sign Robert Woods, who I know he's going to be coming off an injury, but has had established success with your franchise for years now. You got OBJ, who will probably miss most of the season, but still was good for you last year. And they decided to let both those guys go. At least with OBJ, it's still tentative, but they let both those guys walk. They passed up on the rest of the free agency class and stood on the table, paid Allen Robinson a 3-year, $46.5 million deal, some decent guarantees in that contract. They are standing on the table and telling you this. This is our wide receiver too. That is what they are saying. They're standing on the table with that. They're committing. This is a pretty big commitment, a lot bigger than the case with OBJ. And considering his last major injury and last 1,000-yard seasons are better outlooks and better projectors than what OBJ was heading into, the midway point of last season with, I can only assume Allen Robinson is going to be even better than that 12-point per game mark. As a matter of fact, I think he's going to put up similar numbers to what Robert Woods has been doing with the Rams over the past 4 years, where Woods, since 2018, was putting up over 15 fantasy points per game each season. I honestly think Robinson will have a bounce-back season as he is remotivated. And again, much better situation, the things that people hammer home 1,000 times. And I do believe he's going to put up close to 15, 16, 17 points per game. Really would not be shocked if he goes back into top 15 fantasy status at the receiver position this upcoming year. Now, we should absolutely still be concerned about last season. That just doesn't go away. But I am willing, with all the factors and all the things that I just talked about, I am willing to give Robinson a pass and give him a second chance. If it doesn't work out this year, we'll revisit and it'll probably be a different story. But this is kind of a weird situation, and I absolutely understand the concerns again. But that's my 2 cents on the situation with Allen Robinson. If there's a dip in your redraft leagues this year because people are concerned about last season, I'd absolutely buy it and go get myself some Allen Robinson shares in redraft this year. Even in Dynasty, currently valued as a 9th-round startup pick. If you're a contending team, go out and get A-Rob. Go out and do it. Again, that's where I stand on the situation. I appreciate you guys for hopping in here, tuning in with me. We're going to have plenty of fantasy content coming at the Right Way Sports Network over the next couple months, leading you up into your redraft leagues, and of course during the season as well. But we're going to have you covered with plenty of content like this here on YouTube, the Twitter, our website. Got the links to all of those in the description so you can access them. Go follow us over there. And of course, our Patreon page. We're making people tons of money over there each and every day. The investment, the reviews are awesome. People love it. People are making money. I want you to get in on the action as well. Go put a little extra money in your pocket. But that's all I got to say. That's all I got to talk about here with Allen Robinson. I'll see you guys next time.